This is Red Podcast, episode number 247. I'm in the final stages of my new book. The basic manuscript is done, working with a team of editors, and I'm talking about the editing process on this episode.
This is the Red Podcast. Here's your host, David Hooper.
David Hooper here, Red Podcast, the marketing podcast for experts. Part of that expertise, for a lot of experts, you want to put it in a book. I am finishing up my new book, maybe in a couple months, finishing up my new book. That's what I hope is happening. I thought I was going to finish it up a couple years ago. I've been working on it about 3 years. Hadn't happened yet, but we're on the home stretch, so I'm taking you along, talking about the behind the scenes of this book project. And I want to talk about working with editors. I saw the editors this week. I say the editors. It's a team of 2 editors that I'm working with now. Later on in this episode, I'll be sharing a couple of big ideas that I think will help you if you're going through the book writing process, specifically the editing process. And you should be editing if you're doing a book. A few weeks ago, I did a podcasting event called Podfecta. It took place in Nashville, Tennessee. Lucas Hendrickson is a guy who was there. He and I go way back, almost 20 years, both of us working in the music industry. Not only is he a print journalist, he is also the host of a podcast for Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels being the whiskey company, not a guy. At Podfecta, he was on a panel for editors and producers, and he said something that I think does a great job explaining how I feel about editors. Here's the clip.
Thank God for editors. Everyone needs them. Don't ever think, whether you're a print reporter, whether you're an audio guy, that you do not need an editor. Yes, it's great that everyone can fire up their computer, put on a microphone in front of it, and do a podcast, but you always need eyes and ears on your product. End of story.
Editors are important. Editors are the people who help a guy like me, and maybe somebody like you, a big idea person, get his message in order. My experience of doing a few books, and I think I've got maybe 10, 12 books done at this point, is that the book you start with is not the book you end up with. And that's for 2 reasons. It's because as you're going through your book, the information that you put within that book, your knowledge, your experience, all of that is expanding. But at the same time, to have a great book, to have one that really connects with people, the information also needs to contract. It needs to get more focused. It can't be everywhere. You're not trying to write a book that's all things to everybody. You're trying to write a book that's some things to some people. So during the process, things get a lot more focused, or they should get more focused. You're getting more stuff in your initial draft, and you've got to find that balance. That's where editors come in. Editors are like what I would call in the music industry, what I used to call them when I was in the music industry, a third ear. It's somebody who look at something from a fresh perspective. And I believe that fresh perspective, it can be summed up by asking this question. Does this add something to what I'm trying to do, or does it take away? I feel that podcasting is the same way. If you're going to interview somebody on your podcast, you're asking a question. Does that question move the interview forward, or does it distract? You're going to have those same kind of elements in a speech that you do, a blog entry, book, anything that you do. Are you moving forward, or are you being distracted? But the issue we run into as the creators, the big idea people, is sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we're being distracting and we don't know we're being distracting. Sometimes there's something that we think might be distracting and maybe it needs to go in there. Let me give you a quick background about how I started working with the 2 editors that I'm working with now. Previously, I was working with a single editor. This is the editor that got me through my last book. I liked working with her. She's a good friend. She's somebody that I trust. She's seen my business for the last 10 or 12 years very intimately, so she knows it inside and out. But this last 3 years, there have been a lot of starts, there have been a lot of stops, there have been a lot of do-overs. I've got editors because I want a fresh perspective on what it is that I'm doing. And what happened with this project is that it's lasted so long that even my editor needed a fresh perspective. So a few months ago, we parted ways, not in the ways that our friendship or our business relationship even is damaged. She's just not working on this project. I brought in new editors for this project. They work as a team. And the first thing that I gave these new editors was the big jumbled mess of one of those broken down books. 40, 50 pieces. I don't know how many documents that I had. I do know that it was about 120,000 words, a big, big mess. In fact, the book was such a mess. There was some duplicate content. Things were all over the place. one of the new editors came back to me and she said, you've got to get us a clean draft. Go through every single thing, stack it up exactly how you want it, make sure there's no duplicate content, get us a clean draft, then we'll start working on it again. So for this last rebuild, remember, fresh perspective, I brought in somebody who had nothing to do with the book, broke everything down into this 40, 50 pieces. I can't even remember how many pieces that there were at this point, but there were at least 40. Redid the outline entirely, went through everything to make sure there was no duplicate content. Because again, a big project like this, I found myself repeating things in the last part of the book that I'd already said in the first part of the book because it took so long to get the book to this level, I've forgotten what I'd already written. I look back on this book now and think, man, I've worked on this thing at least 3 or 4 times longer than I've actually needed to because I've done a lot of the work twice. I've built, I've torn down, I've rebuilt. I'm not frustrated about that because I'm so passionate about this topic. By the way, the topic, marketing via podcasting, marketing via media, marketing via broadcasting. And I'm so passionate about that. And I know there's something in there. I don't mind doing whatever it takes to get this book out. I've done books in the past. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes you have to go through this messy process, the process of collecting and having that book expand, and the process of narrowing that book down, and the process of figuring out exactly what it is that you want to say as you're in the middle of everything. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback, go back into the past and try to have some kind of revisionist thing like it could have been different. Maybe it could have. But I know that this is where I am now. I know it's taken me a long time. Yeah, maybe I would have been able to half the work. I don't know. The important thing to me is that this book gets out. It's an important message. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. And that's going to happen. It's just not happening as quickly as I thought it would. And I'm not the only one who has this happen, by the way. A lot of people have this happen, even with experience. And I've got experience. It happens. Still, I'm sharing it with you because I think this message, the message of this podcast episode, is also an important message to get out. And that's that sometimes projects take longer than we thought that they would. At the beginning, I mentioned 2 big ideas on editing that I want to share with you. I shared one of them, fresh perspective helps. It may take a little bit longer for you to get it done. A book isn't necessarily the kind of thing that you can white knuckle though. Sometimes you need to walk away, come back fresh. It also helps to bring new people in. We get way too close to our own projects because we've had this idea, we started working on it, and it gets even worse if we start working on it too long. In this case, 3 years, a super long time. You're way too close to it. It's way too big for you to really have a full picture of what you got in front of you. And this isn't just related to books. Sometimes when I'm doing a podcast, I get mush mouth, I just can't think, brain starts freezing up. Walk away from the studio, come back the next day when I'm fresh. In music, we call this ear fatigue. You see this a lot in producers, mixers. You're working on an album. You don't know what's good. You don't know what's bad. You walk away. You come back when you're fresh. That's the first big idea on editing. Fresh perspective helps. The second big idea, clear communication is paramount. I've got lots of examples of this in the process of editing the book. First, parting ways with the first editor. That was actually her idea, but it was also something I've been thinking about. It took one of us to tell the other one, hey, maybe this is an option. Maybe we need to try something different. Another great example of that clear communication is when I took this big jumbled mess to the new editors, got a message back from one of them, and she said, you need to fix this before we can help you. Some people would be offended by that. I went back to her. I said, this is exactly the clear communication that I want you to have with me. As you're going through this book, if you see something that doesn't belong there, if it's not up to par with what you think that I can do, I want you to come back to me, and I want you to be direct with me on it, because that's what's going to allow me to have a better book. And that's my goal. It's not my ego. It's not getting it out very quickly. It's getting a good book out eventually. Not years down the road, but if we're talking about an extra couple weeks, an extra month, worth it. I want you to run through this with a fine-tooth comb. I want you to be clear with me on exactly what you think needs to be done. The book comes first. Don't worry about my feelings. Something else related to this clear communication, because you are the author, you're the one driving the ship, is that this is your project, and it's up to you to make the final decision on what goes or what stays, what changes or what doesn't change. What do you want as the author? You need to be clear. So many times I've seen people come up with a manuscript, hand it off to an editor. I don't worry about that. That's the editor's job. Nope. Don't do it. If you want a good book, a book that's really going to make impact, you need to work with the editor. You can't just hand your project off to an editor, expect that she's going to do it, he's going to do it. It's you working with the editor, but you ultimately are in charge. You can't pass everything off to an editor, have nothing to do with it, and expect it to come back great. Nobody is going to care about your project more than you're going to care about your project. So let me give you the final update in the process. 2 editors now. The first has finished it. She says it's strong. The second editor of the team, she is working on it now. She says it's strong as well. Should be getting that back soon. I will update you on that. Will there be more rewriting? Yes, absolutely. This book is far from done. It's going to be coming out shortly, next couple of months or so, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. If you're not already subscribed to Red Podcast, I will be having several more updates. That is one way to get them. The other way for you to get them is to go to redpodcast.com. I've got a mailing list. I will send you updates as well as some other cool things that you can do to spread your message, especially with podcasting and books right now. Those are the 2 things that I'm focusing on. You can watch the behind the scenes of me. I will also share tips on how you can do the same with your own podcast, with your own books. Thank you for listening to Red Podcast. I will see you soon with another update.
You've been listening to Red Podcast. Never miss an episode. Subscribe now with your iPhone, Android, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.